My name is Sherry, and at 29, I stood alone at the airport gate, watching my entire family's Instagram stories from their Cancun vacation, a trip they'd deliberately hidden from me. Through my cousin's accidental tag, I discovered they'd been planning this family reunion for months in a secret group chat that excluded only me. Tears blurred my vision as the boarding announcement for my flight to Bali broke through my thoughts. I gripped my first-class ticket, purchased with the promotion bonus they didn't even know about. Before we dive into this journey of betrayal and ultimate liberation, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's felt excluded by your own family? Hit that like button if you've ever been the black sheep, and don't forget to subscribe because this story of sweet revenge and self-discovery is about to unfold in ways you won't expect. Trust me, what happens when the family's scapegoat finally stops playing their assigned role will leave you cheering. Standing in that airport, memories flooded back of a lifetime spent on the periphery of my own family. As the middle child sandwiched between James, my older brother, who could do no wrong as a successful surgeon, and Mia, my younger sister, who remained the eternal family princess, I had always occupied a strange space in our family dynamic. Looking back, the signs were everywhere, like breadcrumbs leading to this moment of crystal clarity. The exclusion started young, so subtle at first that I convinced myself I was imagining things. There was the family portrait when I was 8 where they somehow forgot to call me downstairs, resulting in a beautiful professional photo of my parents with James and Mia that still hangs in their living room today. I remember finding them all dressed up, the photographer packing up his equipment, my mother's dismissive wave when I asked why nobody told me. Just an innocent oversight, she said, though they never scheduled a reshoot. Then came the Disney trip when I was 12. I had saved my allowance for months, so excited about meeting the princesses and riding Space Mountain. The morning they left, I was at my friend's house for a sleepover. They claimed they knocked, but I didn't answer, so they had to leave without me to make their flight. When I called sobbing, my father said they'd bring me next time. There never was a next time. Instead, I spent that week with my grandmother, looking at photos they posted from the Magic Kingdom, my siblings wearing matching Mickey ears that said best brother and best sister. High school brought more creative exclusions. When James graduated as valedictorian, the whole family took a cruise to celebrate. When I graduated with honors and a full scholarship to university, we went to Applebee's, but only after Mia's dance recital finished. My acceptance letter to one of the top business schools in the country was met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," while my mother planned Mia's Sweet 16 party, which had a bigger budget than my entire year's tuition. College was where I started to notice the pattern wasn't just neglect, but something more deliberate. Parents' weekend came and went without their appearance, always some excuse about work or Mia's competitions. They made it to every single one of James's medical school events, though, driving 6 hours each way. When I graduated summa cum laude with my bachelor's degree, they arrived 3 hours late, missing the ceremony entirely because Mia had a minor cold and needed tending. My professional achievements became invisible footnotes in the family narrative. When I landed my first job at a Fortune 500 company, the family group chat responded with 3 thumbs-up emojis. When Mia got a part-time job at the mall, my mother threw a dinner party to celebrate her independence. My promotion to manager at 25 went unnoticed, overshadowed by James buying his first stethoscope. Each milestone I reached seemed to create more distance, as if my success was an affront to the family order. The engagement debacle last year should have been my wake-up call. When I introduced Marcus to the family, they spent the entire dinner interrogating him about his background, making snide comments about his state school education and his father's blue-collar job. My mother pulled me aside to ask if I was sure I wanted to settle for someone so beneath our family standards, this from a woman who hadn't worked a day in her life. The constant undermining and hostility drove a wonderful man away, and my family's response was relief that I had dodged a bullet. 3 months ago, everything shifted into focus. My mother mentioned casually during our monthly obligatory phone call that they were planning a small gathering for Dad's 60th birthday. Nothing fancy, she assured me, just immediate family. When I offered to help with planning, to contribute financially, to handle logistics, she brushed me off with practiced ease. "Don't worry about it," she said. "We have it handled." I should have known then, but some pathetic part of me still believed I was included in their definition of immediate family. The discovery came accidentally, as these things often do. My cousin Katie, sweet but not the brightest, posted an Instagram story from her packing process. There in the corner of her overflowing suitcase was a printed itinerary titled Dad's 60th Birthday Bonanza in Cancun. My heart stopped as I swiped to her next story, showing a WhatsApp group chat notification that read 23 members. The group name was partially visible, but I could make out enough to see the words "No Sherry" in parentheses. My hands trembled as I immediately called my mother from the airport, playing dumb to see how far the deception would go. Her voice was unusually cheerful when she answered, background noise muffled, but distinctly festive. When I asked what she was up to, her lie came smooth as silk, just enjoying a quiet morning with your father, watching some television. The sound of mariachi music and clinking glasses told a different story. I pushed further, mentioning I was thinking of dropping by this weekend to see Dad for his birthday. The pause was telling, followed by a rushed explanation about how they were actually going to visit Aunt Helen in the nursing home. Wouldn't be around. Such unfortunate timing. In the background, I heard Mia's distinctive laugh followed by her calling out about the family photo shoot in 10 minutes. My mother's sharp intake of breath was followed by a hasty excuse about the neighbor needing help with something urgent before the line went dead. Sitting in that airport lounge, I became a digital detective, combing through every family member's social media with the determination of someone who needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. What I found was worse than mere exclusion. It was a coordinated effort spanning months. Screenshots accidentally included in posts revealed planning sessions I was never invited to, discussions about keeping the trip secret from me specifically, jokes about finally having a drama-free family vacation. James had posted a photo 3 weeks ago at what I now recognized as a planning dinner, captioning it with "Sometimes the best family gatherings are the ones where everyone actually wants to be there." The comments below were a mix of inside jokes and thinly veiled references to my absence. Aunt Linda wrote, "So peaceful without certain people stirring the pot," which garnered 15 likes from various family members. My own grandmother had responded with prayer hands emojis. The secret WhatsApp group was the most painful discovery. Through various screenshots and slip-ups, I pieced together that they called it Dad's 60th surprise, no sherry. As if my exclusion was so central to the celebration it needed to be in the title. They had been meeting monthly at rotation houses, sharing potluck dinners while planning this elaborate vacation. My childhood nickname Shadow appeared repeatedly in cruel contexts, jokes about how appropriate it was since shadows weren't really part of the picture anyway. One particularly nasty thread showed them discussing logistics, with my sister-in-law suggesting maybe they should invite me to avoid drama. The response was swift and unanimous. James wrote that I would just make everything about my career and make everyone feel bad. Mia added that I would probably bring some inappropriate +1 just to prove a point. My own mother, the woman who gave birth to me, wrote that sometimes peace was more important than completeness, and everyone deserved a vacation from walking on eggshells. The irony of being accused of making others walk on eggshells by people who had spent decades making me feel like an unwelcome guest in my own family was not lost on me. Every interaction suddenly made sense through this new lens. Every forgotten birthday, every missed achievement, every family event I heard about after the fact. It wasn't neglect or oversight, it was intentional erasure. My best friend Emma found me crying in the airport bathroom, having tracked my location when I didn't respond to texts. Through hiccuping sobs, I showed her everything, watched her face transform from confusion to rage as she scrolled through the evidence. Her response was swift and decisive. She grabbed my phone, pulled up my banking app, and pointed to the balance in my savings account. The money I had diligently saved for a house down payment, sitting there like potential energy waiting to be converted into something powerful. That promotion to vice president I had earned last month came with a substantial bonus, money I had carefully allocated for my future. Emma's suggestion was simple but revolutionary. Why invest in a future where you're trying to build something stable enough to impress people who will never see your worth when you could invest in yourself right now? The logic was flawless, the opportunity perfect, the timing poetic. With shaking fingers, I navigated to a luxury travel site, my cursor hovering over packages to various destinations. Bali called to me, with its promises of spiritual healing and physical distance from everything toxic in my life. I selected dates that perfectly overlapped with our Cancun trip, then systematically upgraded every single option. First-class flights, private villa with infinity pool, personal butler service, private chef, unlimited spa treatments, exclusive excursions. Each click felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The total was staggering, more than I had ever spent on anything in my life, nearly my entire bonus and a good chunk of my savings. The old Sherry would have closed the browser, would have been practical and sensible and saved for the future. But the old Sherry was also sitting alone in an airport while her entire family celebrated without her. The new Sherry hit confirm with a smile that felt foreign on my face, then upgraded to the premium package just because she could. The first-class experience began the moment I handed over my ticket, ushered into a world where I was valued and catered to simply for existing in that space. Champagne appeared in my hand before I even settled into the pod that would be my cocoon for the international flight. As we lifted off, I raised my glass in a silent toast to the family who thought I wasn't worth including, then posted my first strategic Instagram story. The image was subtle but effective, just the champagne glass catching the light with the first-class cabin visible in the background, location tagged as heading to paradise. I watched the views roll in within minutes, each family member's name appearing like dominoes falling. James viewed it first, probably screenshot it to share with others. Mia followed within seconds, then my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandmother, who barely knew how to use Instagram. 14 hours later, I emerged from my first-class cocoon into the humid embrace of Bali, where a driver holding a sign with my name waited to whisk me away to a resort so exclusive it didn't even appear on standard booking sites. The private villa exceeded every expectation, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, an infinity pool that seemed to blur the line between human construction and natural beauty, and a staff of 3 dedicated solely to my comfort. My personal butler, Maid, introduced himself with warmth that felt genuine despite being part of his job. He walked me through the villa's amenities while I documented everything for my next strategic post. The fully stocked bar, the private spa room where therapists would come to me, the chef's kitchen where my personal cook would prepare whatever my heart desired, the outdoor shower surrounded by tropical plants, the king-sized bed with a view that would make waking up feel like a continuation of dreams. I waited exactly 3 hours before posting the villa tour, knowing my family would be settling in for dinner in Cancun. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone buzzed with the fury of a disturbed hornet's nest, my mother's contact photo flashing with an incoming call. I let it ring once, twice, then answered with the same false cheer she had used on me. Her voice was shrill with indignation, demanding to know what I thought I was doing, how I could waste money like this when there were so many practical things to save for. I stirred my welcome cocktail and informed her calmly that I was celebrating my promotion to vice president, something she might have known about if she had ever asked about my life. The silence stretched before she sputtered about how I should have told them, as if the responsibility for maintaining family connections fell solely on my shoulders. The family WhatsApp group that had excluded me for months suddenly remembered my existence, adding me back without apology or explanation. The messages poured in fast and furious, each more accusatory than the last. James led the charge with typical medical precision, dissecting my financial irresponsibility and diagnosing me with various attention-seeking disorders. Mia's messages were tearful voice notes about how I was ruining Dad's birthday by making everything about myself, ironic considering I wasn't even invited to the celebration. My father, who had been silent throughout my childhood achievements, found his voice to express disappointment in my selfish behavior. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly felt compelled to share their thoughts on my life choices. The aunt who had called me shadow chimed in with armchair psychology about middle child syndrome and cries for help. The hypocrisy was staggering. This family, who had systematically excluded me, now demanding to be centered in my vacation decisions. The pile-on continued as I settled into my first resort dinner, a 7-course tasting menu prepared by my personal chef on the villa terrace. Between courses of culinary art, I responded selectively, each message crafted to maximum effect. To James, I sent a photo of my view with a caption about how success looked different for everyone. To Mia, I suggested she focus on enjoying the family vacation she was actually invited to. To my parents, I simply said I was following their example of making choices that brought peace. But the real revelations came later that evening, when the family's initial anger gave way to alcohol-loosened tongues. Aunt Linda, 3 margaritas deep based on her progressively deteriorating grammar, sent a long rambling message about how I had always made everyone feel inferior with my achievements, how it wasn't fair that I got promoted so young when her own children struggled to find jobs. She revealed what I had long suspected but never confirmed, that my success was seen not as a source of family pride, but as a personal attack on everyone else's adequacy. My mother's sister Barbara added her own confession, admitting they had deliberately planned family gatherings when they knew I couldn't attend, using my work schedule against me. She justified it by saying my presence made their own children feel bad about themselves, as if my existence was an act of aggression. The truth was uglier than any fiction I could have imagined. My family hadn't just forgotten me. They had actively worked to erase me because my success held up a mirror they didn't want to look into. The most painful admission came from Mia in a private message sent after midnight Cancun time. She wrote about how she had always been jealous of my independence, how her parents' constant comparisons had made her resent me. But instead of addressing those feelings or the toxic family dynamics, she had chosen to participate in my exclusion. She ended with a manipulative plea about how I was the one breaking the family apart by not just accepting my place. My place. As if families came with predetermined hierarchies and assigned roles that could never be challenged or changed. As if I was supposed to gracefully accept being the forgotten middle child, the one whose achievements threatened rather than inspired, whose presence disrupted rather than enhanced. The clarity was crystalline and devastating, but also liberating in its finality. The next morning brought fresh waves of manipulation as my family regrouped from their initial emotional responses. My parents led the charge with a coordinated attack on multiple fronts, starting with financial threats that revealed just how little they knew about my life. My father sent a formal message about reconsidering my position in their will, apparently unaware that I had never expected or factored inheritance into my financial planning. The threat of losing money I never counted on held all the power of a water gun in a thunderstorm. My mother took a different approach, weaponizing guilt with the skill of someone who had perfected the art over decades. Her messages spoke of breaking grandmother's heart, disappointing the family legacy, and abandoning the values they had raised me with. The irony of being lectured on family values by people who literally created a group chat to exclude me was not lost, but I didn't waste energy pointing it out. Instead, I posted a sunrise yoga session on the beach, tagging it with quotes about finding peace in solitude. The flying monkeys descended by mid-morning, relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly deeply concerned about my well-being. Cousin Michael, who couldn't remember my birthday but somehow found time to lecture me about family loyalty, sent 3 voice messages about the importance of forgiveness. Great Aunt Helen, who I distinctly remembered my mother saying they were visiting instead of seeing me, called from her assisted living facility to express confusion about why I wasn't in Cancun with everyone else, inadvertently confirming another lie. But while my family spiraled in their resort, I was building something beautiful in mine. The solo travelers' breakfast gathering at the resort brought unexpected connections with people who understood the liberation of choosing yourself. There was David from Australia, escaping his own toxic family situation, and Marie from France, celebrating her divorce from a controlling husband. We bonded over fresh fruit and ocean views, sharing stories of breaking free from people who claim to love us, while systematically diminishing our light. Our impromptu support group caught the attention of Natasha, a travel blogger with 2 million followers who was staying at the resort to review it. She joined our breakfast the second day, fascinated by the common thread of family trauma and chosen freedom that connected us. When she heard my story in full, her eyes lit up with the fire of someone who recognized viral content gold. She asked if I would be willing to share it on her platform, and I agreed with the caveat that I could tell it my way. The TikTok video was filmed on my villa terrace, with a Bali sunset as backdrop. In 90 seconds, I distilled years of exclusion and the liberation of that airport moment when I chose myself. Natasha helped me craft the narrative arc, starting with the discovered WhatsApp group name and ending with me toasting my family from my infinity pool. She posted it with the caption, "How I spent my toxic family's vacation budget," and tagged it with hashtags about chosen family and self-worth. Within hours, the video exploded across platforms in ways I never anticipated. Thousands of comments poured in from people who saw their own stories reflected in mine, who had been the family's scapegoat or forgotten child or success that threatened insecure relatives. The momentum built as other influencers shared it, adding their own stories of family toxicity and the freedom found in walking away. My Instagram follower count jumped by 50,000 in a day, filled with messages of support and solidarity. My family's reaction to viral fame was predictable in its chaos. The same relatives who had called me attention-seeking were now furious about the attention I was actually receiving. James threatened legal action for defamation, apparently not understanding that truth is an absolute defense. Mia posted her own tearful video trying to paint me as a bully who was ruining their vacation, but the internet saw through the performance and the ratios were brutal. My parents attempted damage control by claiming the whole thing was a misunderstanding, but screenshots of the No Sherry group chat had already become a meme. The plot twist came courtesy of Katie, the cousin whose Instagram story had started this whole journey. Still in Cancun and apparently oblivious to the family devastation around her, she continued posting updates that revealed the cracks in their perfect vacation facade. Her stories showed half-empty restaurant tables as family members feuded, my father's face getting redder with each meal as his credit card was repeatedly declined, my mother arguing with resort staff about room assignments that had been bungled in their chaotic planning. The universe seemed to have its own sense of justice as their exclusive family vacation crumbled. What should have been a celebration became a disaster of their own making, starting with the resort overbooking that left half the family in substandard rooms far from the beach. The private beach club they had booked turned out to be closed for renovation, something anyone who did proper research would have known. The deep-sea fishing excursion they had planned for the men ended with everyone violently seasick except for James, who spent the trip lecturing the captain about proper safety protocols. But the crescendo came with a food poisoning incident that Katie documented in real time, apparently not realizing how damaging her play-by-play was. The bargain buffet they had chosen to save money after overspending on show-off amenities became ground zero for a gastrointestinal disaster that affected 3/4 of the family. The images of my usually pristine mother green-faced and miserable, my father raging at resort management between bathroom runs, and my siblings fighting over the one functioning toilet in their suite painted a picture of karmic justice I couldn't have orchestrated better myself. The final blow came from Mother Nature herself in the form of Hurricane Patricia, upgraded from tropical storm to Category 2 overnight. The evacuation orders came at dawn on what should have been their last full day, turning their coordinated family photo shoot into a chaotic scramble for flights home. The exclusive resort that had seemed so important became a trap, as limited evacuation options meant only those who could afford inflated last-minute flights could leave immediately. The rest were bussed to overcrowded shelters to wait out the storm. Katie's final story before evacuation showed my family in the shelter. Their resort were looking absurd among the humanitarian cots and emergency supplies. My mother clutched her designer bag like a life preserver, while my father raged on the phone with airlines that couldn't manufacture seats on sold-out flights, no matter how much he yelled. The family that had excluded me for making them feel inferior now faced actual inferior circumstances, their perfect vacation reduced to survival mode. 3 days after their evacuation from paradise turned nightmare, my family issued a summons disguised as an invitation. The family emergency meeting was scheduled for the day after my return, location to be determined, attendance mandatory. The old Sherry might have jumped at their command, desperate to fix whatever they deemed broken. The new Sherry responded with a calendar link for a 2-hour slot at a neutral restaurant, making it clear that my attendance came with conditions including a fixed end time and public location. I arrived 15 minutes early to center myself and establish territorial advantage by choosing the large corner table. My appearance was carefully curated, the kind of effortless elegance that comes from spa treatments and inner peace rather than anxiety and people-pleasing. The family trickled in looking like hurricane refugees despite being home for days, their faces bearing the exhaustion of people who had been fighting among themselves since the shelter. My mother's attempt at a power play by trying to hug me was deflected with a polite handshake. My father's effort to sit at the head of the table was thwarted by my strategic positioning. One by one, they arranged themselves in a parody of family unity that fooled no one, least of all the waiter, who picked up on the tension immediately. I ordered sparkling water and waited, having learned that silence was often the most powerful response. James broke first, his medical training useless in navigating emotional terrain. He launched into a prepared speech about family unity and how my social media stunt had damaged their reputation. I let him finish, then calmly asked which part was a stunt, the part where they excluded me, or the part where I went on vacation anyway. His face reddened as he sputtered about twisting things, but I had receipts in the form of screenshots already loaded on my phone. The accusations flew fast and thick once the dam broke. I was selfish for ruining Dad's birthday by making it about myself. I was irresponsible for spending money on luxury instead of saving. I was cruel for airing family business publicly. I was unstable for choosing to vacation alone instead of trying to work things out. Each accusation was a projection, each criticism a mirror they refused to look into. I documented everything in my notes app, knowing this would likely be our last family gathering. Mia's tears came on schedule, the waterworks that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. Between sobs, she accused me of always having to be perfect, always making everyone else look bad, always needing to be the center of attention. The irony of being accused of attention-seeking by someone literally crying for attention in a public restaurant was not lost on the adjacent tables, whose interested looks made my family squirm with the discomfort of public scrutiny they couldn't control. When the emotional manipulation failed to generate the groveling apology they expected, my parents shifted to more aggressive tactics. My mother demanded I remove all social media posts about the situation, claiming defamation and emotional distress. My father threatened legal action if I didn't comply, his voice rising enough that our waiter discreetly checked if everything was all right. The veneer of respectability they wore like armor was cracking in real time, revealing the ugly dynamics that had always existed behind closed doors. This was my moment, and I took it with the calm precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. From my bag, I pulled out a folder I had prepared for this exact scenario. Inside were printed screenshots dating back years, evidence of systematic exclusion and cruel commentary. The No Sherry WhatsApp group was just the latest in a pattern of behavior that included the family portrait incident, the Disney trip abandonment, the missed graduations, the undermined achievements, and the coordinated campaign to exclude me from family events. I spread the evidence across the table like tarot cards revealing their future. There were their own words calling me shadow, discussing how to handle the Sherry problem, planning gatherings specifically when I couldn't attend. There were the messages mocking Marcus for his background, the jokes about my promotion making them look lazy, the complaints about how my success was a personal attack on their mediocrity. The table fell silent as they confronted their own cruelty in black and white. But I wasn't done. The coup de grace came in the form of a book proposal I had already submitted to 3 publishers, all of whom had expressed serious interest. The working title was No Sherry, a memoir of family scapegoating and finding freedom. I slid the proposal across to them, watching their faces transform as they realized their behavior would be immortalized in print. The chapter titles alone told the story, from the empty chair at Disney to building paradise from exile. My mother's reaction was pure narcissistic injury, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine before landing on rage. How dare I air family business for profit? How could I betray them like this? What would people think? The fact that she cared more about public perception than the decades of pain inflicted showed exactly why this book needed to exist. My father tried to bargain, offering money to bury the project, not understanding that this was never about money, but about truth. James attempted gaslighting with medical authority, suggesting I was having some kind of breakdown and needed professional help. I agreed that therapy was wonderful and informed him I had been going for 2 years to process the trauma of growing up in a family that saw my existence as an inconvenience. His follow-up suggestion of family therapy was met with my laughter, genuine and free, at the idea of therapeutic intervention for people who couldn't even include me in a vacation. The extended family members who had tagged along tried to minimize, claiming it was all jokes and misunderstandings, that I was too sensitive and couldn't take familial teasing. I asked them to explain the joke in excluding someone from a family reunion, the humor in creating a group chat specifically named to keep one person out. Their silence was more honest than any words they had offered. Even Aunt Linda, 3 margaritas sober this time, couldn't spin exclusion into inclusion. When manipulation failed, they moved to bargaining. Suddenly, there were invitations to upcoming events, promises of inclusion, assertions that I had always been part of the family despite evidence to the contrary. My mother even offered to throw a belated birthday celebration for all the ones they had minimized, as if a party could erase decades of being treated like an unwelcome guest in my own family. The desperation was palpable, but it wasn't love driving it, it was fear of exposure. I let them exhaust themselves with promises and threats, then stood to leave. My prepared closing statement was brief, but comprehensive. I acknowledged their right to choose who to include in their lives and stated I was simply exercising the same right. The book would move forward because these stories needed to be told for everyone who had been designated the family problem for the crime of existing authentically. Any further harassment would be met with legal action, and my lawyer's card was included in their folder. The last thing I said before walking away was that I forgave them, not for their benefit but for my own freedom. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or allowing continued access to hurt me. It meant releasing the hope that they would suddenly become the family I deserved and accepting they were the family they chose to be. The look of shock on their faces as I walked away, without begging for inclusion, was worth more than any inheritance they could dangle. The extinction burst began within hours of the restaurant confrontation. My phone became a battlefield of notifications as family members launched their campaign to regain control. Love bombing alternated with guilt trips in a textbook display of toxic family dynamics. Suddenly, I was included in every group chat, tagged in every family memory, invited to every possible gathering. The same people who had systematically excluded me now couldn't bear the thought of me excluding myself on my own terms. My mother led the charge with daily messages that cycled through the narcissist's playbook. Nostalgic photos of my childhood appeared with captions about how much she missed her middle child. Invitations to lunch came with promises of one-on-one bonding time we had never shared before. When I didn't respond, the messages shifted to concern about my mental state, suggestions that I was having a breakdown, offers to help me find a good psychiatrist who could fix whatever was wrong with me. The extended family divided into camps like a dysfunctional civil war. Some sided with my parents out of habit or fear of becoming the next scapegoat. Others reached out privately to share their own stories of exclusion and manipulation, aunts and cousins who had noticed the treatment but felt powerless to intervene. My grandmother surprised everyone by publicly supporting me, revealing she had always seen the dynamic but had been threatened with reduced access to grandchildren if she interfered. When love bombing failed, they escalated to more aggressive tactics. My father attempted to weaponize professional relationships, calling my company to express concern about my mental stability. The joke was on him when HR informed me of the call and offered additional security measures. My boss, who had promoted me specifically for my ability to handle difficult situations with grace, found the whole thing amusing in a protective sort of way and made sure building security had photos of my family members. Mia tried a different approach, creating sob story videos about losing her sister to social media fame. She painted herself as the victim of my cruel abandonment, conveniently editing out the context of why I had walked away. Her followers, mostly people who knew our family, weren't buying it. The comment section became a battlefield where truth fought revisionist history, with screenshots of the No Sherry group emerging every time she tried to claim inclusion had always been available. James made the mistake of trying to diagnose me publicly on his professional social media, suggesting that middle child syndrome had manifested into serious psychological issues requiring intervention. The medical board found his behavior interesting enough to warrant an investigation into professional conduct. Using his medical license to harass and attempt to discredit a family member violated multiple ethical guidelines. His supervisor suggested he take some time off to deal with his own family issues before analyzing others. The discovery that my parents had been trying to access my financial accounts through emergency contact information I had foolishly left unchanged sent everything to a new level. The bank's fraud department caught the attempts and locked everything down, but the violation of attempting to steal from me while claiming to want reconciliation revealed their true priorities. It wasn't about family or love or healing, it was about control and punishment for stepping out of my assigned role. Private investigators started showing up at my apartment building and workplace, hired by my parents to dig up dirt that didn't exist. My neighbor thought it was hilarious and started giving them increasingly wild false information about my supposed secret life. My doorman, protective of residents who actually treated him with respect, made sure I knew every time someone came asking questions. The investigators found nothing because there was nothing to find, just a woman living her best life after cutting out toxic people. The legal threats escalated when they realized I was serious about the book. Cease and desist letters arrived from lawyers who seemed embarrassed to be sending them, given that truth is an absolute defense against defamation. My own lawyer, a friend from business school who specialized in these cases, responded with documentation that made their lawyers recommend dropping the matter. The discovery phase of any lawsuit would only provide more material for the book and potentially open them up to countersuits for harassment. Social media became a war zone they were ill-equipped to fight. Every attempt to paint me as the villain backfired spectacularly, as the internet had already chosen sides. The No Sherry group chat name became a rallying cry for family scapegoats everywhere. Memes proliferated, TikTok psychologists analyzed the dynamics, and my family became unwitting poster children for toxic behavior. Their attempts to go private only fueled speculation, and distant relatives shared increasingly damning stories of their behavior. The implosion was spectacular to watch from a safe distance. Without their common enemy to unite them, the family turned on each other. James blamed Mia for being too obvious with the social media posts that exposed them. Mia blamed my parents for raising me to be too independent. My parents blamed each other for handling the situation poorly. The extended family retreated to avoid becoming collateral damage. The cohesion they had found in excluding me shattered when I removed myself from the equation entirely. My cousin Katie, still oblivious to her role in exposing everything, continued documenting the family destruction. Her posts showed awkward holiday gatherings where half the family wasn't speaking to the other half. The grand Christmas celebration my mother tried to orchestrate fell apart when only 6 people showed up. The New Year's Eve party was canceled when they couldn't agree on who was to blame for the situation. Every tradition they had built on the foundation of excluding me crumbled without that unifying factor. The restraining orders became necessary when my father showed up at my office building demanding to speak with me. Security handled it professionally, but the escalation from emotional manipulation to physical stalking required legal intervention. The judge who reviewed the evidence seemed personally offended by the No Sherry group chat and granted comprehensive protection. The order covered not just physical proximity but also third-party contact and digital harassment, giving me the legal shield to continue healing without their interference. A year later, I stood in the same airport where everything had changed, but I was unrecognizable from the broken woman who had discovered her family's betrayal. The therapy journey that followed the initial liberation had been intense but necessary, peeling back layers of conditioning that told me I was only worthy of love if I made myself small enough not to threaten others. My therapist helped me understand that being the family scapegoat wasn't random. It was because I represented everything they feared in themselves. The grief came in waves at unexpected moments. Not grief for the family I had lost, but for the family I had never actually had. I mourned the little girl who saved allowance for a Disney trip she was deliberately excluded from. I grieved the young woman who graduated with honors to an empty auditorium section where her family should have been. I cried for every achievement minimized, every milestone ignored, every moment of joy I had learned to celebrate quietly so as not to upset those who should have been celebrating with me. Building authentic relationships after a lifetime of dysfunction required rewiring my entire understanding of connection. I had to learn that healthy people didn't punish you for succeeding, that real friends celebrated your victories without seeing them as personal attacks, that chosen family could provide the unconditional support blood relatives had withheld. The travel community I had connected with in Bali became a foundation, people who understood that sometimes the greatest journey was away from those who claimed to love you most. My professional life soared without the constant drain of managing family dynamics. The promotion to senior vice president came with opportunities one would have previously downplayed to avoid threatening anyone. I accepted speaking engagements about overcoming toxic family dynamics in the workplace, turning personal pain into professional expertise. Companies paid premium rates for my insights on breaking generational patterns and building healthy corporate cultures. The very success my family had resented became my platform for helping others. The book deal exceeded all expectations, with publishers recognizing the universal need for stories about surviving family scapegoating. No Sherry, When Family Becomes the Enemy, resonated with millions who had their own version of being excluded from the family portrait. The advance alone was more than my parents had threatened to cut me out of their will over. The book tour brought connections with others who had walked similar paths, creating a chosen family spread across continents. The foundation I established for family scapegoats started small, but grew as the book gained traction. We provided resources for people trying to break free from toxic family dynamics, from therapy funding to legal assistance for restraining orders. The annual conference became a gathering of survivors who had turned their exclusion into excellence. My mother would have been mortified to know that her treatment of me had inspired a movement, but then again, she had always underestimated my ability to transform pain into purpose. Dating after Marcus required learning to trust my own judgment again. The man I eventually met understood, without extensive explanation, why I didn't have family at our intimate wedding ceremony. David had his own journey with toxic relatives and recognized healthy boundaries as strength rather than cruelty. He celebrated my achievements without feeling diminished, supported my work without trying to contain it, and understood that family was about choice rather than chromosomes. The partnership we built was based on mutual respect rather than assigned roles. A chance encounter at my cousin's wedding provided unexpected closure. I attended for Katie, the unwitting hero who had exposed everything with her careless social media posts. She had always been kind to me, just not particularly aware, and I didn't hold her responsible for my family's choices. The wedding was elegant but tense, with careful seating arrangements to keep feuding family members apart. The family that had united to exclude me had fractured into camps that barely tolerated each other. I arrived with David, radiant in designer clothing I no longer felt guilty about affording. The shocked faces of family members who hadn't seen me since the restaurant confrontation were priceless. I looked expensive and peaceful, a combination that clearly disturbed those who expected to find me broken by their absence. My grandmother made a beeline for us, her hug genuine and tearful. She whispered that she was proud of me for breaking the cycle, that she wished she had been strong enough to do the same decades ago. My parents looked diminished, their marriage clearly strained by the weight of their exposed behavior. They attempted to approach, but David smoothly redirected us to the bar with the grace of someone protecting his partner. Mia stood alone, her usual crowd of admirers absent, watching me with something between resentment and regret. James sulked at a corner table, his wife having filed for divorce after realizing she had married into a toxic dynamic that would eventually target her too. The extended family members who had participated in my exclusion gave me wide berth, unsure how to interact with someone who had refused to play their assigned role. Some attempted awkward small talk that I politely but briefly engaged with before moving on. Others simply stared, perhaps seeing in my transformation what they could have become if they hadn't accepted their own places in the family hierarchy. The cousin who had called me about forgiveness avoided eye contact entirely. During the reception, I overheard fragments of conversation that revealed how thoroughly the family had imploded without their unifying scapegoat. Trust was broken between siblings who blamed each other for the public embarrassment. Parental relationships with adult children were strained by exposed manipulation. The extended family had retreated into careful politeness that masked deep resentments. The family that had bonded over excluding me had nothing to bond over once I excluded myself. When it came time for the family photos, I politely declined with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The photographer's assistant, unaware of the dynamics, tried to insist that all family should be included. My calm response that I wasn't part of this family sent ripples through the assembled group. Some looked relieved, others ashamed, but none protested. I stood to the side with David, toasting the bride with champagne, finally comfortable being exactly where I belonged outside their frame. The profound lesson crystallized as I watched them arrange themselves for the portrait. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people give you is their absence, but you have to be willing to receive it. Being excluded had felt like rejection until I realized it was actually liberation in disguise. Every family gathering I wasn't invited to was an opportunity to build real connections. Every achievement they ignored was proof I didn't need their validation to succeed. Every cruel nickname and dismissive comment had been preparing me to walk away without looking back. True family, I had learned, was chosen through consistent actions rather than assigned by blood. It was the friend who held me while I cried in an airport bathroom and helped me book a life-changing trip. It was the travel community who celebrated my journey without seeing it as a threat. It was the readers who found hope in my story and the foundation members who turned their pain into purpose. It was the partner who understood that love meant supporting growth rather than demanding shrinkage. Self-worth, I discovered, couldn't be determined by those who benefited from my unworthiness. My family had needed me to be less so they could feel like more, but their math had never been my reality. The opposite of love wasn't hate. It was the indifference I now felt toward people who had once held so much power over my emotional state. Healing meant grieving what never was while celebrating what could be without them. Standing at another airport gate, preparing to board a flight for my next adventure, I smiled at how different this moment felt from that devastating discovery a year ago. My phone buzzed with messages from genuine friends planning my surprise 30th birthday party, thinking they were being subtle, but delighting me with their transparent excitement. The boarding call for first-class passengers had me gathering my things without shame or guilt, walking confidently toward a future I had built on the ashes of exclusion. The woman who had cried over a no-sherry group chat had transformed into someone who understood that being excluded from toxicity was inclusion and freedom. I had broken generational curses not through confrontation but through absence, showing that the only person whose permission I needed to live fully was my own. As the plane lifted off toward new possibilities, I raised my champagne in a final toast to the family who had accidentally given me the greatest gift by showing me exactly where I didn't belong, so I could finally find where I did. The sun set over the Pacific as I flew toward tomorrow, grateful for every moment of exclusion that had led to this liberation. My story would help others find their own freedom from the shadow of families who couldn't celebrate their light. The book would be published, the foundation would grow, and somewhere, another forgotten child would realize that being excluded from dysfunction was actually an invitation to excellence. What started as a story of rejection had become a masterclass in redemption, proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, but proving yourself right. The family that had tried to erase me from their picture had instead inspired me to paint my own masterpiece, one where I was not just included but centered, celebrated, and finally, fully free. Thank you for joining me on this journey from exclusion to excellence. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever been the family scapegoat or the forgotten child or the one whose success threatened insecure relatives, I want you to know that your freedom is waiting on the other side of their rejection. What's your story of breaking free from toxic family dynamics? Share in the comments below, and let's build a community of people who chose themselves when their families wouldn't choose them. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in the power of chosen family, and subscribe for more stories of transformation and triumph. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that being excluded by toxic people isn't rejection, it's protection. Remember, you are worthy of being celebrated, not tolerated, and sometimes the best family is the one you choose for yourself.